Yeah. Is Aaron there? If Aaron or Ben are on, can one of them say hi? Okay. She did leave. How about Ben? Yeah, could somebody run down the hall and snag? Well, I guess that's a little bit athletic, but snagging. All right, let's move ahead with the gossip discussion.
Hello, I'm Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. So Linus Nordberg and I have worked on the draft about how to use gossip in the certificate transparency model to try to provide additional checks on some of the players in the CT ecosystem. I think Steve's description of this as a complex system with lots of moving parts is definitely something to be concerned about. And so the gossip draft tries to address that specifically with the goal of trying to make sure that the logs are not misbehaving. So just wanted to clarify this, right? The goal of the gossip is to make sure that the logs are doing what they claimed that they would do. So logs need to prove that they are honoring the MMD, the minimum merge delay. I think I got that acronym right. And then they need to make sure that they shouldn't be presenting split views of the history that they provide to, like, so when two different clients query them, they shouldn't be able to provide one view to one client and another view to another. And the folks who are doing this, we've called them auditors traditionally. I've noticed some discussion in the mailing list that we're dropping the term auditor or something, and I'm actually a little surprised by that. Maybe I missed that part of the discussion. So we have traditionally called the folks who are checking up on the logs auditors. So I'm using that term still here. If we're not supposed to be using that, then I'd like to know what we should call it, because it's a different job than the monitoring job.
Yeah, it's not decided yet. It's okay. Open. But for the purpose of the discussion, we all, auditor, we know what you mean. So,
okay.
So go ahead and use it.
Sounds good. So next slide, please. So, looking at we spent quite a while looking at the different players in the CT ecosystem, and it seems obvious that that the work of a monitor is probably involves quite a lot of data and doing quite a lot of work with the log. It seems likely that pretty much every monitor is also going to be an auditor effectively, but there may be parties that can act as auditors that don't need to act as monitors. The monitor is effectively getting all of the data from the log and reviewing it to see whether things have been included that shouldn't have been included, and the auditor is doing slightly less work. They're doing sort of consistency proofs and inclusion proofs and making sure that those things show up properly. So not all auditors are monitors, but we expect probably all monitors would be able to act as auditors. So next slide, please. So the biggest problem that we ran into in trying to spec this out is a privacy issue with gossip. So it turns out that when you're collecting these SCTs from peers that you communicate with, that information is analogous to your browser history or something comparable, at least in the web space. And so there's definitely some sensitive associations that we don't just want to broadcast everywhere. And when we're talking about gossip as a way to like keep track, make sure everyone's seeing the same thing, I may not just want to say, hey, by the way, I'm a regular, like I visited catfanciers.com yesterday because, I might be with a group of people who prefer dogs to cats. So, so the relationship between the clients and the servers are things that we want to protect in terms of privacy. The relationship between the other players in the ecosystem, we don't care so much about privacy. And if people disagree with that, I'd like to hear it. But from looking at it, it looks like everybody else is sort of acting in a public way, but the relationship between clients and servers is the thing that we want to protect. So that drove our decisions about how gossip is supposed to work. Next, please. So the things that need to be gossiped in order to make sure that everyone's sort of seeing the same view of the world. Well, individual auditors can gossip signed tree heads to each other. So if there are multiple auditors who are both trying to keep a certain log honest, they can share signed tree heads amongst each other, and then they can pairwise look for consistency proofs from the log for the different signed tree heads that they've seen. So that tends to protect against the log presenting split view of the world to different auditors and to different log clients. The other thing is that server operators and auditors can share any SCTs that they've seen. So that is, if I run catfanciers.com and I want it to be, I want to make sure that the logs that I'm working with have honored the various promises that they've made, the MMD and so forth. I can send them all of the SCTs I've ever seen for myself. Now, normally you'd say, well, what are you going to see for yourself? And most servers aren't going to automatically know that. They're not going to have extra SCTs for themselves. So the third piece of the puzzle is that a client talking to a server can say, hey, I've seen some other SCTs for you, and here they are, and here are the certificates that went with them. And then, so that keeps that particular relationship confidential because it's the server now who's talking to the auditor and says, hey, this is what I'm seeing about myself. Clients can also talk to auditors directly if they have a trusted relationship with them. But that's not required and should not be required for clients in order to be able to make this work. So next slide, please. This is just a graphical visualization of what I was just talking about. So these are all the players in the current ecosystem without gossip, right? So the monitor here is just saying, hey, give me everything from the log. The website is asking for a CT from the log. That might happen mediated by a CA, or it might happen live. The browser is communicating with the website. This is in the HTTPS context. Our gossip only actually works specifically for HTTPS. It doesn't work for other TLS mechanisms at the moment, so you should be aware of that. And then the auditor is doing these different things. It's asking, given a timestamp, I want a signed tree head. Given 2 signed tree heads, I want a consistency proof. And given a signed tree head and a SCT, I want an inclusion proof. So this is without gossip. It's already a complicated ecosystem. Next slide, please. With gossip. So the auditors talk to each other and share their signed tree heads. The browser will say to the website, hey, here's some other SCTs and certs that I've seen for you. So the website maybe can build a cache of those. The website then talks to the auditor. Either the auditor polls the website or the website goes to the auditor and says, hey, here's some things that I found. So the auditor is collecting all these signed tree heads and SCTs. And then that dashed red arrow, that's a trusted relationship there where the browser acknowledges that the auditor is likely able to do things like de-anonymize them or learn their traffic habits or whatever. If the browser does have a trusted relationship with an auditor, they can send the SCTs and certs that they've seen to the auditor as well. The auditor now has this collection of SCTs and STHs and can get the various proofs from the log to show that the log is behaving properly. So that's the outline for how we expect gossip to work for HTTPS. Did I thoroughly confuse people? Okay, next slide. So open questions, as I said, it's HTTPS only. Our proposal, if you read the draft, uses well-known URLs between the different parties, and there's a specification for what to send to the different URLs so that gossip can work. We mentioned that auditors, if they're receiving information as a trusted party from clients, that they should not immediately then send that information onto the log, because there's a traffic analysis attack where let's say I want to know what a given client's activity tends to be. I know that they have a trusted relationship with an auditor. I can sit at the network on that auditor, watch the requests come in from the client that I care about. And even if that's encrypted, I can then see what requests come out from the auditor in that form, and then I can infer something about what the client was asking and learn something about the client. So we recommend that auditors actually mix information in. All of this detection is going to be done after the fact anyway. None of this is going to prevent a connection from occurring, right? This is all happening offline. So a little bit of extra latency for the mix will provide a level of privacy for the clients who have a trusted relationship with the auditor. But we don't have an explicit mix policy defined. And then there's an open question about how the auditor talks to the server, whether it's poll or how often, should it be poll versus send? There may be a business relationship that's defined there between servers and auditors. So that's what we sorted out. We went through a bunch of different options of other ways that you could try to gossip, and pretty much all of them seem to run afoul of the privacy concerns about basically browsers revealing their history to the peers that they're gossiping with. So, questions?
Steve Kent, BBN. First, I want to thank you that I thought those were beautiful diagrams, and that the first one, which is the before adding in the audit parts, belongs in 6962 bis or in an architecture document, because it does the clearest job of explaining the presumed relationships among the components here. So I think that's an outstanding thing to do.
I don't think we can do SVG and RFCs yet.
No, you have to turn it into ASCII art.
Okay.
Yeah. Second, though, at various points you talk about clients, and I think there's some inconsistent use between the way you're using the term and the way 6962-BIS does at the moment, because 6962-BIS talks about all the other elements being clients of logs.
I see.
And you're talking about clients as TLS clients, which I believe, correct?
Yeah, in this
that makes perfectly good.
That may not be in the draft. I'd have to reread the draft.
Oh, no. I'm just saying that it's going to be important that we get consistency in terms of the terminology.
Absolutely.
And I think that's very good work. Thank you.
Wes Hardiger, can you go back to the diagram slide? Yeah, that one. No,
The first one.
next one. That one. It really doesn't matter. So how often do you envision the TLS client browser sending SCTs to the auditor?
We haven't specified a specific timing, and it does assume, therefore, that for this to effectively detect a misissuance, it means that someone who has seen an invalid SCT needs to at some point reconnect to the legitimate server, or have one of these trusted relationships to an auditor. We will not be able to detect it in that case. The frequency of sending seeing the other ones, we haven't sorted that out. If you have recommendations, I'd be happy to hear them.
No, I mean, I'm assuming that browsers will only do it when they see something new, or they're not going to send it for every connection, but they're
no, it's not. Yeah. It's not on every connection. It's actually a separate post to the website using the well-known URL. If you
right, but I don't mean to the auditor in particular. So is the browser only sending bad?
So to the website, it will send SCTs that it didn't like. If it's seen a bunch of SCTs for a given site, then it'll send it to that site.
Right.
As far as what it sends to the auditor, I suspect it should send everything to the auditor. But again, local client policy, we do make a point that if your user agent allows the user to do things like delete cookies and history, it should also delete this local cache.
I just worry about the scalability of an auditor trying to collect records for the entire internet, and the auditor being able to implement that successfully in a scalable way.
So I'm not expecting that every single connection would result in it being kicked back. The user agents are going to see the same SCTs multiple times as they visit. They're not going to send them every single time that they see it. So, yeah.
Hi, Rick Andrews, Symantec. I like the picture too. Would you please add CAs as another bubble? Because only CAs can send pre-certs.
Sure.
No one else can send pre-certs.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, Stephen Farr, just echoing from Jabber. C. Peters said start TLS and SMTP, why not include it? And I have an answer from Jabber. Lenos says, it says HTTPS all through. Ben says, in the long run, yes, maybe include that. When they started, there was very few SMTP certs or CA issued. And then separately, Ben said he imagined browsers sending SCHs to websites and vice versa, but I think that was answering a different point. So I guess the question initially was SMTP and StarTLS.
So for SMTP and StarTLS, the reason that we didn't define it for them is because our feedback mechanism from browsers to websites, or browsers to servers, I can't say clients to servers anymore now that Steve pointed that out, is HTTPS. So if we say that we're doing SMTPS, we don't have a guaranteed mechanism for delivery. So if someone wants to spec out what that would look like, how to gossip back to a server that supports SMTPS, then that would be great, but we spec'd it out for HTTPS. Maybe it's a new SMTP verb.
Okay, do people feel that this is a correct model for gossip for CT? I mean, gossip and consensus protocols can be incredibly complex. This one's pretty simple approach. Seems effective. How do people feel that this work should go forward?
Yaron Scheffer, Intuit. I'm sorry, I'm virtually a tourist here, but I think that for a generic solution that needs to deal with TLS certificates, using HTTP and limiting ourselves to web HTTPS traffic is sort of not enough.
I agree that it would be better to cover other regions, but this is what we've got at the moment.
Right.
Other
This is what's in
welcome.
this is what's in our charter.
That's what I was going to say. It's also
right, and we are talking about the possibility of additional applications in the future, but for what's defined as in the charter right now is HTTPS. So
realistically, I don't think it's going to happen, and it's one more thing that will make deployment of TLS with other protocols less advanced and less secure.
So Ben is in the Jabber room. I think he's changed what he wanted to say. So I'll give his original comment. So he said, as I said, I thought SDHs should go from browsers or strictly auditors actually to websites and vice versa. And then later he said, so revise my comment as auditors to websites and vice versa.
So he wants auditors and websites to exchange STHs. So I'm not sure what a website would do with an STH.
Yes.
Okay. So Ben, I'm happy to talk.
It would give it to another auditor, he said.
Oh, would give it to another auditor. So we've got this auditor to auditor feedback loop going on here. And so you're saying, so Ben's suggestion is then that websites could have relationships with multiple auditors, and the STHs could be passed auditor to auditor via the website as an interim measure. I would hope that auditors would be interested in communicating with each other. So that seems like an indirect route, and I'm not sure why we need the indirect route.
yeah, and that doesn't sound very scalable.
He's saying, he says exactly so, particularly since many browsers will be auditors and so have no direct route.
So he's saying that browsers will be auditors. I think that reintroduces all of the privacy concerns. The main advantage of the auditors being independent from the browser is that these queries here, sorry, I'm pointing and folks may not be able to see it. The queries between the auditor and the log are things that provide privacy sensitive information. And so if the browser actually contains the auditor, then the browser is basically reporting back to the log all of the things that they've seen. And so our assumption here was that auditors were independent from browsers, and that the auditors are providing a layer of mixing to avoid that particular privacy implication. So if we think that all browsers are auditors, then I actually now have concerns about this draft.
So he says, STHs do not reveal what you have seen, but he agrees with the other concern.
Yes, I'm not claiming that handing back the STHs are the issue. It's the browsers being auditors that's the issue.
How many people have read this document? Wow. Okay. Given that it's probably premature to talk about adoption, I think it needs people to have at least looked at it before we talk about making it a working group deliverable. It looks really good, so we'll try and push people to give it some review, and then we'll talk about adoption on the mailing list. Okay, thank you. And how are we doing on audio now?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Who's that? Is that Aaron?
Aaron, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay. This is Aaron Masseri. He's remote. It looks like this is European-sized paper. So I apologize. It's off the left edge of the screen. Okay. So he's going to walk through. I'll read the first couple of RF. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Yes. There we go. All right. So Aaron, you're on.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I want to go over the open issues. The goal is to remind folks what's left for RFC 6962-BIS, and to restart the discussion on the list for on some of them to reach closure. Next slide. Oh, sorry, we're in the component slide. So so basically, I want to go over the issues according to the component. So the first one is the ones that are relevant to RFC 6962-BIS directly, and then we have a bunch of issues that are related to client behavior, and I believe there is an agenda item for that. And the last one is client privacy. There is only one issue there. So next slide. Okay, so that's the list of all tickets. If you can go 2 more slides to the slide that reads ticket 4. Yes, so ticket 4 is about signing the TBS certificate part, both for certificates and pre-certificates, which implies excluding the signature and signature parameters from the signature in the SCT, signed certificate timestamp. And the benefits is that it will be consistent with the pre-certificate, but and that will also mean that if the signature parameters are incorrectly encoded, logs wouldn't be spammed. So we had a problem where if the signature algorithm identifier was corrupt in the unsigned part of the certificate, OpenSSL, for example, would still process it regardless of the sort of corruption, which meant different variations on the same certificate by just changing the signature parameters could be logged multiple times, spamming the logs. So signing the TBS certificate will avoid this problem, and overall, some of the authors think it's a good idea. The downside is that the signature itself obviously will not be included in will not be covered by the SCT, and as things stand now, basically it would be impossible sort of to audit the final signature because the log, when asked for the entry, will provide the entry itself, which only includes the TBS certificate, and the chain that led to it, which will exclude the sort of end entity certificate. So that's sort of that's what we have to balance. Next slide, please. So ticket 10 is about delivery of certificate SCTs through other mechanisms, through mechanisms other than embedding a certificate. So in RFC 6962, the origin of the SCT implies whether if it's for the pre-certificate or a certificate. If this SCT is embedded in the certificate, then obviously it's for the pre-certificate version of the certificate, and if it's provided to the TLS extension or a stable OCSP response, it's for the final certificate, and this ticket suggests allowing delivery of pre-certificate SCTs over TLS extension or a stapled OCSP response, and that is useful mainly for name reduction, right? So in case like a CA would want to log a redacted pre-certificate after it has already been issued and would like to serve additional SCTs over TLS extension, then the only way to do it would be to provide this pre-certificate as it is for pre-certificate. So, that's the motivation for this ticket. And I think one of the suggestions was to define a backwards compatible structure that will contain USCTs and will still be used in the same TLS extension on stapled OCSP response. So the one question is whether we should use the same TLS extension, and if so, how should we define the structure of this, the backwards compatible structure for containing like new style SCTs, which will have the type embedded in them, and old style SCTs. Next slide, please. So the threat model, Steve can't cover that in detail, so I think there is no point of getting into that. Next slide, please. Okay, so ticket 53 is about the ordering of entries in the log. So almost all the current implementations of the current RFC incorporate entries in the order they were submitted. But this is not a requirement, and the document should make it clear that a client should not expect this behavior. So as long as the log incorporates all the entries that were submitted within a given time period in the MFD, that is sort of compliant, or at least it's not a requirement to incorporate for the law to incorporate the submissions in the order they were sent. Next ticket, please. So this ticket, for security considerations, was suggested as a middle ground between mandating client behavior and not specifying it at all, and it's probably redundant given the whole discussion about client behavior, which has grown since this ticket was filed. Next slide, please. Okay, so this ticket is about limiting the number of signed tree heads that a log issues per time unit, and the goal is to avoid client fingerprinting, or basically the log sending a different signed tree head for each get STH request. Sorry, what's the question?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. As for sorry, can you go back to the previous slide? So okay, so about this, so I think this suggestion is overall sensible, except we don't have a good way to enforce it at the moment. Because so if a log would do that, lacking gossip, we will not be able to figure out that's what the log is doing, or at least it couldn't do it for some clients. And at the moment, there is no good way to detect it. So suggestions on that are welcome.
Aaron, there's a question.
Yeah.
Aaron, this is Steve Kent, BBN. So I'm a little confused by the choice of words in the first bullet here. Ticket calls for maximizing number of STHs, and yet what you said, which makes more sense to me, is limiting the number of STHs per unit time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's a typo.
It's the opposite. Okay.
Yes. It calls for minimizing.
Okay, good. I've forgotten. Do STHs have a timestamp and/or serial number?
So the STHs have the timestamp and the tree size and the root of the hash. So technically, a log could issue like multiple STHs for the same tree size with the same root hash just by varying the timestamp.
Yes, I agree, but that seems like something. So if you added to the log metadata not only a maximum time between issuing STHs, but also a maximum number per some unit of time that you agree upon, couldn't an audit function detect by looking at the STHs that had been acquired if the log were to exceed that limit that it had publicly advertised through the metadata?
Yes, I mean that sounds sensible.
Okay, once I made sure I understood maximizing versus minimizing, it seemed to me that the third bullet, that there was a way to deal with the detection of this. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
The next slide, yeah, if there are no more questions about this one. So as I said about client behavior, there are 20 tickets, and I didn't want to list them all, partly because the issue tracker started spewing out 500 errors when I was looking at them. So I think we'll just talk about it later. Next slide. So client privacy, ticket number 8, and that is in this ticket there is a suggestion to preserve the client privacy by batch fetching inclusion proofs. So when the client asks the log for an inclusion proof of a specific entry, it discloses to the log which certificate it's holding, presumably which site it visited. And one suggestion is to send or to request a bunch of proofs around a given timestamp or some bits of the hash, and so the log doesn't know exactly which certificate the client is interested in. It knows about the range or a collection of them. And this is a sort of significant change or a significant effort for logs to implement. We have to sort of specify it carefully, and we are not entirely sure it preserves privacy well enough. There are suggestions for in an iterative version of this approach, where a client keeps asking the log for what's the window size, like how many certificates do you have in this time range, or for this number of hash bits, until the client gets an answer it's happy with, and then fetches the inclusion proof batch for this range. So with the point where it stands now is postponing this ticket so it would not block RFC 6962 bis until we can get better feedback both on the feasibility of the mechanism and whether the privacy assurances this mechanism provides are good enough. And yeah, that's it for my presentation, unless there are any questions on this slide.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Now, how's Ben doing with audio? Okay, Ben, are you there? Any word from him? Okay. Is there anybody from the team that can present the slides and lead the discussion? Is there, Aaron, are you up to the task?
Yeah, I can cover Ben's presentation as well, although obviously I'm less familiar with it.
Okay, wait a second. Meet Echo is on the job. Actually, while we're waiting for this to get straightened out, one of the things that was on the agenda, we don't really have a presentation per se, but it's come up a couple of times, and there's a little bit to talk about there, and that's the status of the client behavior work and whether or not there's interest in starting a new piece of work, developing a document describing client behavior. And I know that you didn't have time to get stuff together, but if you've got anything to say about this. Yeah. Okay. At this point, is there interest in starting work on a document describing client behavior? Yeah, we've got one. Yeah, one person indicated interest. Is there anybody who feels this is inappropriate, out of scope, premature, too late, and just shouldn't be done? Okay, so basically we've got a lack of enthusiasm with this will go out to the mailing list as well. But please give it some thought. How are we doing? If there is interest in adopting the work, are there people interested in participating as editors? One, okay, Steve. Yeah. Okay. Is Ben up yet? If not, we can Aaron can steer this for the time being.
Okay, I'll unless Ben will be able to later join in and present, I'll be happy to go over this. So so Ben actually did a lot of work on the draft. Like he had this awesome and surprising initiative of addressing a ticket every day, which he did for a long while, which was awesome because a lot of the small things got fixed, but also surprising because he resolved or closed some of the bugs which some people felt were not really addressed, which I think since then have been reopened, by the way. So yeah, so I think it's a shame that he can't present it himself, because a lot of that is obviously his work. And so as this sort of slide says, a lot of the like historical tickets and like some of the small changes, some of the bigger changes are now resolved, and I've mailed the list a while ago with the list of resolved tickets. So we will not go over them here. Next slide, please. we will just cover some of the big changes. The first of them was service queue. Basically the option of a client asking for a STH and getting it from front end A of the log server, and then requesting like a recent inclusion proof against this STH, but that request ends up at server B, at like a front end B, so different front end from the same log, which only has an older STH. And when the client tries to then get a new STH, it gets it from front end A. So the client can never really get the right inclusion proof for the STH it holds. So all the APIs were updated to basically to allow the front end to specify everything it has, including an old STH or newer STH if it has one. So the client no longer has to go and request each of them individually, or at least if it does, it can get a newer answer if the log has one. For example, for STHs, the log will provide also, if the client requests an inclusion proof, for example, for an old STH, the log can provide the new STH, a consistency proof between the two, and the inclusion proof for the new STH. Next slide, please. Error codes, yes. So Ben has added a bunch of machine-readable error codes to all the responses. This is mostly useful when the client has to either retry or the request is malformed. So now it should be clear, for example, when a chain is submitted, whether it was not accepted because the certificate itself was invalid or because the route it changed to is not included in the set of routes the log accepts. Next slide, please. Okay, so the API efficiency issue that was resolved is related to the previous one I presented, where now the client doesn't have to perform 3 calls to get an inclusion proof. For example, to get like a fresh STH, the consistency proof between the 2 STHs. So there is an API call to do all 3 basically in one go. Next slide, please. Ben has added a section describing the metadata needed to interact with the log, of the log parameters, including the ability to freeze the log, so it's final accepted STH. The format for the metadata itself is not specified, and yeah, basically that's what every client needs to to interact with a log and make sure it conforms to the RFC. I suggest that whoever brought up this ticket have a look at this and make sure that all of the metadata is covered. Next slide, please. So for algorithm agility,
Sorry. There you go.
So I think the suggested resolution for this ticket is that if a log wants to change algorithms, a hash algorithm or signature algorithm, the simplest way in terms of protocol, simplifying the protocol and making clients' lives easy, is just freeze the existing log and start a new one. So and if it is possible just to feed the data from the old log into the new log, to have the new log include a copy of all the relevant data. So rather than trying to build in agility into the protocol, which will make it significantly more complex, because then each entry, the log will have to indicate which algorithm was used to sign each entry, and will make obviously life of clients much more difficult. This is that's the proposed solution.
Okay, we have a question.
Yes.
Steve Kent, BBN. First, I want to thank you for having done 2 of the things that are cited in the slides. One, adding machine-readable error codes to the responses, I think, is very good. And 2, putting together in the current version of the document all the log metadata in one place and describing the format is very valuable. However, I did file a ticket on the algorithm agility part because this describes a mechanism by which to do it, but it does not provide a comprehensive description of algorithm agility in the way other systems have done, and I provided a reference there. So I think this is a step in the right direction in terms of saying this is how we plan to deal with it, but I would disagree that this solves the problem. Also, just for the heck of it, I think having the words Google, confidential, and proprietary on the bottom of each slide is probably not what you want to do for IETF presentations.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Okay.
So about the confidentiality note is Ben's fault, but about the algorithm agility. So just to understand the concern, this is about not having like a well-described or a well-specified list of steps of how to migrate a log or how to migrate a client from the old log, which with sort of one algorithm, to a new log with a different algorithm. Is that right?
I think that's basically true. If you look at the RFC that I cited as an example, it describes the phases that one goes through in terms of ensuring that there's continuity of operation, that clients don't suddenly discover that what they were doing before doesn't work now, et cetera. So I'm not saying you have to go to as much detail as in that RFC, because that was dealing with a system that was trying to deal with things that could change in different time scales, some of which could be quite long. But I think a more detailed description that everybody could read, and from a client perspective for all the different flavors of clients that are involved here, that it tells them exactly what it is they'll need to do, how they are expected to detect this, and how they're expected to deal with it, including, for instance, in the context of audits. If auditing functions are supposed to deal with the possibility of funny stuff happening across what appears to be an algorithm change boundary, then how do we know that one wasn't just freezing a log and starting a new one to hide inconsistencies, for example? So that has to be addressed at some level.
Mm-hmm. So I agree with that. I think it's a very good point, right? It should be clear how sort of a client sort of migrates from logs. I think it's like, at least the way I see it, it's related to incremental deployment, which is an issue if I remember correctly, you've also raised in the past, and somewhat to client behavior, right? So what should the client do? How should the client know that a new log is being deployed and should replace an old one? And this is something that I'm generally interested in documenting. I'm not sure what sort of the right format or forum for doing that, because what I can document is the particular experience we've had for one specific TLS client that we've implemented, not for everything. But if there is a sort of like a right forum or a right way to document that, I'll be happy to do that, and hopefully include these sort of concerns or suggestions on how to handle these log migrations as well.
Okay, there don't appear to be more questions. All right, thank you. So it seems we've completed our agenda. Does Ben have anything additional? Or Ben, by the way, mentioned that he's fixing the notice on the slides. Okay, in the absence of anything else, I think we're done. The questions about adoption of the threat analysis draft will go out to the mailing list. We'll bring several other discussions out to the mailing list as well. Okay, Stephen?
Stephen, so I just have a question. Is what's the kind of expectation for timing now for the base document?
It appears that I think the goal is to have all of open issues resolved by the next IETF, which would be July. And I'm hoping to get it into working group last call about that same time frame. But
okay, be nice if it was quicker, as always. But
as always, yeah. We've had a few surprises, but I think that the result of the delay will be an improved document. Okay, thank you very much. Great. I'm sorry? Oh, I have a link. It hasn't been revised, and we need a new revision out and more discussion, and then we'll start talking about adoption. Yeah, it simply just wasn't. Yeah, but it's still interesting moving it forward. We just need to have it a little bit more fully baked. Yeah, he left Huawei. He's with Alibaba now, and I guess the Alibaba hasn't been involved with the IETF at all, and so this is sort of a new thing for them, and they're trying to sort it out. And I guess there are visa issues, of course, and so we didn't have time to deal with that. Okay, so you're sending the URL? Yeah. I mean, I've got it bookmarked because it's like not obvious. So this apparently is 40 years old this month. RFC 681 network units. Have you read this? It's amazing. It's like, well, because it's recommended that you close all file descriptors because each user only has 16, and things like that.
And it's written in all caps?
Yeah, it was written in all caps. May 1975. So. RFC 681 network units. So it was yet another attempt to provide file system semantics for, and syntax for network operations. So you'd open/dev/net/whatever. Oh, really? No, shells should be shells. I mean, that's amazing. But yeah, this is. Yeah. Yeah, would you like to? Okay. So we can update that. Right now it says December 24th.
Sign-in page when you go there, you fill once and then you go look up your password and then you succeed. It signs you in and then the sign-off page still stays there. So it's like, oh, it was wrong. I did it again. And while I showed you it, it redirected me.
No, that's not enough. But, it completes the 69. It complements it. Yeah. Thank you so much for volunteering to take that. We need to start providing more incentives like swag or something. I don't know.
Wait, the sticker. Yeah, you can pick your choice.
Silver, there, silver stick.
On the blue circle. There you go.
Yeah, it's a nice diagram, by the way.
I do not want this to be. No matter that we agree to do it, I don't want that.
Okay, thank you. we need to talk with the authors about updating the milestone and being a little bit